Recording.
Great. So again, calling to order the Vermont Apprenticeship Advisory Board for November 14th, 10 a.m. at the Vermont Department of Labor, but also virtually for those who are interested. We can just for public and for the record do intros in just a second, but just to give a quick rundown of the agenda to make sure we're all good with the agenda, don't have any edits. We'll do, again, quick intros. Our first update is of the recent Austria visit. A group of us went to the Republic of Austria as part of an ongoing memorandum of understanding and agreement we have with them. We'll give an update on that and talk a little bit about how that trip went and what we gleaned from that experience. Then we'll give an update on our federal apprenticeship program and monitoring, as well as the upcoming National Apprenticeship Week, which is next week. We'll talk at the board level about things like ratio variance, pre-apprenticeship versus youth apprenticeship. Then we'll do just general board questions or topics of interest for a little bit. Some housekeeping, discussion of future meetings, reimbursement paperwork, yada, yada, yada. And then we'll open it up to public comment if there is anybody from the public who is joining. And then we'll adjourn. So it may take us all the way till noon, or we may, depending, be able to get out a little early. So with that, let's just start with a quick round of introductions. We'll do folks online first, and I'll just call on folks based on the order on the screen, and then we'll go around the room. And again, that's just for the record and for anybody. So Jeff, will you go first?
Yeah, Jeffrey Wilmette, International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, labor representative for the committee.
Ronnie Basden, Executive Director at Vermont Works for Women.
Jerry.
Jerry Bakke, Network Director of Workforce Development for the UVM Health Network.
And Amelia.
Amelia Wurzburg, Emerging Pathways Coordinator at the Agency of Education.
Great. You're very quiet, Amelia, just so you know.
Okay, do you need me to repeat myself?
If you want to, feel free.
Okay, I said Amelia Wurzburg, Emerging Pathways Coordinator at the Agency of Education.
Great, thanks, Amelia. Jay, we'll start with you.
Hey, Jay Ramsey, Director of Workforce Development at the Department of Labor.
Pam Benoit from Benoit Electric.
Great. Michael Harrington, Commissioner for the Department of Labor and I guess de facto chair of
Trevor Charter, Department of Corrections.
Sarah Knight, Department of Labor. I am the Apprenticeship Program Coordinator.
And Andrew Broughton from Agency of Education. I guess I'm the designee.
Yeah. Great.
Oh. I'm Marie Halbert.
Great. So were there any questions, comments, or any edits to the agenda? Otherwise, we'll move. Okay, hearing none. First up is the Austria visit. I'm going to pass it to Jay and we'll go from there.
Okay, so this presentation that I have up in front of you and that you have printed here includes these two areas, the updates and the board discussion. So you're going to see the screen a lot. So the updates, I'm going to talk about Austria. We're going to talk about the apprenticeship program monitoring that happened last week from the Office of Apprenticeship at the U.S. Department of Labor. And then we're going to review the plans for National Apprenticeship Week, which is next week. So our Austria exchange, a little bit of the context and history here. Maybe 4 years ago, the U.S. Department of Labor Office of Apprenticeship entered into a bilateral agreement with the Republic of Austria to bring their expertise around apprenticeships to the United States. Kind of simultaneously, General Knight of the Vermont Guard has been fostering a relationship with the Austrians, and some, I think, friendly military exchanges. And then last year, last year. We signed, we being the department, the governor signed a bilateral agreement with the Republic of Austria, specifically around apprenticeship and technical education, so that we have a system set up for exchanging information. Last year, that signing, we had a signing ceremony at Husky Injection Systems, and the ambassador was here. And then as part of Apprenticeship Week, we had a webinar basically with a couple of Austrian apprenticeship and manufacturing experts come in. So that's sort of the nature of our relationship. The ambassador has been here 3 times. The last time she was here was in, the Austrian ambassador to the United States, Petra Schneebauer, came last time in March or April and visited the one-stop job center in Burlington. We had a tour, and then we had a little dialogue with her and some of her staff. And then they're asking us to come over there. So Commissioner Harrington kind of led this formation of this team that was Commissioner Harrington and me and Lindsay Curley, the Secretary of Commerce and Community Development, and Tim Tierney, who also is with the Commerce Agency. He's the International Business Development person up there. So the 4 of us went over 2 weeks ago. The tours arrived on Sunday. The tour started on Monday in a lower part of Austria called a state called Styria. Their capital is Graz. And the Agency of Commerce's interest in this area is trying to create a sister state program. So their economy is similar to ours. Their topography is similar to ours. They have more people than we do, I think, but
The size of their city, I think, is the size of Vermont.
yeah.
So
The
Graz
capital
is about
city.
600, 700.
So that's a little bit of the context. I'll say more about it as I'm going through the slides, but we're interested in their economic development system. I'm going to talk to you about a little bit of points about their education system and their apprenticeship system. So just to look at a map, where is Austria? We landed in Vienna. South of Vienna is the state Styria. That's part called Lower Austria. They call it the Green Heart of Austria. That's their brand. So we were in Graz. And this is the picture from the signing ceremony last year. There's an apprentice from Husky there in the middle, if you're wondering who that person is. So I guess my reflection, and I would ask for yours also, what's different? How are our systems different? Well, in their system, every business belongs to the Chamber of Commerce, and every business pays dues to the Chamber of Commerce. And what the businesses get for that is advocacy with their parliament. They have a training center that businesses can send their employees to get trained. They don't have a community college system. So I guess the parallel for us is that Chamber of Commerce's training center functions like our adult CTE and pieces of the community college system.
The chamber makeup is very different there. So it's kind of like a quasi-governmental organization, and there's one chamber for every state. So it's not like every region or community like in Vermont or across the US that has a chamber. So the state of Styria has the Styrian Economic Chamber. And so you can imagine with every, beyond just governmental funding and grants, having every business pay dues into this chamber, they have, a budget that is tens of millions of dollars. But they operate, outside of the economic side, they have a heavy footprint in education and training. So they do everything from aptitude testing for kids in elementary school all the way up to adult CTE. The only thing they don't do is like public education for.
So you can kind of hear from the way that that's structured, the culture is oriented around that kind of system of organization, and their public education system. Basically, if I were a student in their education system, I could go from kindergarten all the way to a PhD and have it paid for at no cost to me. There are some costs, like let's say my bachelor's degree, I took 5 years, I would have to pay for that 5th year, but it's €300 a semester. So their entire system is organized to taxpayers support individuals' achievement along their education path. If the education path isn't for you, the backup system or the parallel system, as they call it, a dual system, is apprenticeship. And I'm going to show you a grid that maps out the different layers to their system. I was having trouble understanding it as they were talking, because every time we talked to someone, there's like a new piece of the map was revealed, and it didn't make sense to me. But we finally got a presentation from someone at the training center that had this slide in it. Their systems are aligned better than ours are. As Commissioner Harrington was saying, the Chamber of Commerce here has a testing center for 7th and 8th graders. And every school in the state is invited to send 7th and 8th graders. They do computer-based testing. They do like I'm going to call practical exams and tests of manual dexterity as a way to help the 7th and 8th grader understand what they are good at, what they have the aptitude for. They didn't call it aptitude testing, but what they do with the results of that, it just goes to the student. The parents don't get a copy, the school doesn't get a copy, the chamber doesn't keep a copy. It's just information for that student about themselves. And so to help them understand what their options are.
And you mentioned this, but just to put a laser point on it, these kids at the age of 15 have to decide, am I going to take the educational route, or am I going to take the trade and apprenticeship route?
So at 15, they have to
15.
know.
At 15, no, it doesn't mean there aren't situations where they go one path and they make a change. So we saw apprentices that were in, would have been high school age. We also saw apprentices that were in their 20s and 30s, right, depending. But for the most part, at 15, they will need to make a decision. Do I look at an apprenticeship opportunity where I'm going to work for an employer, taking courses for my 16, 17, 18, and 19 years, or am I going into the educational system?
So their apprenticeship starts early.
Yes. Yeah. And so what happens is by the time they finish their apprenticeship, it's like somebody who would have finished college almost.
Yeah.
Right. Except maybe a little earlier. Yeah. They also are required to do military service or civil service. So 6 months. They can either do that before or after, but they have to do 6 months of military service or like 18 months of civil service if they choose not to go into.
Did you get a sense, I mean, obviously not like exact percentages, but how does it compare? Like here in Vermont, I think it's a very small percentage of students that go into CTE centers. What was it like there?
I think it was like 42% or
I mean,
48%.
that's the comment about their culture. Like,
Right.
Also keep in mind they've been around for 500 or 600 years, and so their culture values the trades as equally as they value the university path.
That's great.
Yeah. And the to your point, so some of this was, not surprising. Like some of it was pretty much the traditional apprenticeship programs you hear, plumbing, heating, electrical, advanced manufacturing. Some of it was more on the engineering side, which we don't see a lot of apprenticeships on because of the heavy college focus.
Right.
But they even had they had a 3-year apprenticeship program for being a waitress. Right. So I'm like, wow, I can't imagine doing 3 years. And then if you wanted to add on like chef or cook, it turned it into a 4-year apprentice.
I was gonna say they must not have any 1-year programs, because if they're starting at 15, I mean, they still have to finish
Right.
enough schooling.
They probably do. We didn't drill into, they call them professions instead of occupations, but we didn't get into what are all of the professions that you could learn.
So am I right that doesn't matter what you choose, it's paid for,
Yes.
everything?
What
is
there
the-
is some cost, but like to your point, it was like $300
Yeah.
a semester,
Yeah.
or €300.
So how much does it cost to be a chamber member?
That I don't know.
That's gonna be pretty high.
That I don't know.
Yeah,
But
their taxes are very high. They said
Okay,
that is one of the, that's how they pay for all the stuff. Your businesses have high taxes, regular citizens have high taxes, but they didn't talk to a regular citizen about their taxes,
Yeah.
but what they were telling us was people could see the benefit of investing in the individual citizens. You have basically the taxpayers invest in you all the way through whatever it is you want to do, and then you're contributing to the next generation, and it's just part of their culture, their psyche, I guess, if you say.
they, the pay for apprentices is pretty low. We were trying to do the math, and we were kind of getting different answers from different apprentices, so it wasn't perfectly clear, but it's something like in the high teens to 20,000 euro a year. And so, but the other interesting thing is that I think what we see often here is somebody would become an apprentice, like for Benoit Electric, and they would stay with that employer. It's not uncommon there to finish your apprenticeship and then find a new one. And again, I'm sure that happens here, but for the
more
most part,
common now than it used to be.
yeah, I bet.
Mhm.
But there it's like, some will stay, but many of them will finish their 4-year apprenticeship program and just find other employment. But again, I think because they're all paying into the system,
Yeah.
employers kind of take that as like, it's just.
Right.
And there's each sector or each profession has basically a guild set up. So this is the next thing, it's the professionalization across sectors. So all the waiters are in this guild, if you will, learning their profession. And in the manufacturing sector, we heard about specifically, the guild negotiates a contract. So they're stating their wages. So every year they're negotiating with the chamber what the wages are for this entry level
Mhm.
profession. So
Did you
So
see
it's across
healthcare
the board.
roles represented in these professions?
they did not, it's a separate system that goes through the university system. So they didn't seem to have any professions in healthcare.
But it was
For
interesting
apprenticeship.
because they kind of said that there's these different, so like the chamber doesn't include lawyers because the
Right.
lawyers have their own chamber. So there's like the main chamber and then there's like these probably 4 or 5 other. So like healthcare kind of had its own chamber, attorneys had their own chamber, a couple others, but so there's like one large chamber and then these small.
But we still have contact with, we're still communicating with them, so we could have someone
Yeah,
connect into a meeting and talk about, how the healthcare system works there and how they train professionals in it.
Yeah, I think that would be, maybe we look for a future meeting to have someone from the chamber join or a few of them. They did a great presentation. They had a couple different folks from different areas. And that way we could also, if you had questions, we could ask them.
That would be amazing.
But I'm seeing it looks like there's like a sliding scale based off commercial income. It's pretty complicated.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So is there a difference in training with respect to private sector employers and municipal and sector employers like we have here?
I don't know. That would be a great question.
Yeah, we didn't get into that.
Like we represent private employers and municipal employees. And they talk about the differences in training and how there is, everybody wants more training to be more efficient and proficient. And that seems to be different depending on who you work for,
Then-
municipal
and
or private.
I don't know if you get into this in the slides, Jay, but like the interesting thing is, and one of the differences is that here, right, the related instruction, the classroom, and then the job are working in tandem with one another, right? So you're doing work during the day, you're taking classes in the evening, or whatever the setup is. There, it's you go and work for the employer for like 10 months, and then 2 months you spend actually embedded, in a it's kind of like a tech center or a school, an apprenticeship school. And so you're doing 2 intensive months, 8 hours a day, 5 days a week at this school.
So I'm gonna move on. This is the busy slide. I'm not gonna try to delve into it. I will send this image as a separate, it's a PDF file. I'll send it to everyone with this slideshow after the meeting. So you can look at it, but basically the different columns across the top are your age and grade level. And then the rows are sort of the different options that you have available to you. So their compulsory education goes up to age 15. And then if you want to continue on, you can do that. The dual system is you don't have to continue in the education system. You can move into training and employment.
So like the gray at the top is either your age or your grade, depending on which gray bar. But the kind of yellow and then moving into the orange is the public education system, primary, secondary education. And then you get to kind of this age 15, which is the orange. And that's when you start picking different tracks. And then the red is the post-secondary level education, so more advanced education.
And
So they're doing 4 years of CTE versus like 4 years of high school.
Yeah, if you're counting the CTE as kind of the apprenticeship.
Yeah.
then you have to qualify. So there are certain qualifications that have to be met to go to university. So you have to, one of the qualifications, you have to graduate high school, and then there's an entrance exam. If you don't qualify for university and you elected to go to the apprenticeship route, there's still classes you can take that would then qualify you to go into the university route. There was one apprentice on one of our tours that was taking one of those classes, but she realized that what she wanted to do because of the apprenticeship was something that required a degree. So they have all of these systems built so you can move back and forth between them if that's what you want to do. So we won't.
It's amazing just to see this in one slide.
Yeah.
Pretty inspiring.
So I'm gonna move on and show you some pictures. So this is our first group of apprentices. They were on our first company tour, first night, with a company called KNAPP.
The K, you got a
KNAPP.
KNAPP.
KNAPP. They're a distribution and logistics company. They design warehouse management systems. So one of their largest customers is Walmart. They designed the racking system and the.
So it's like fully automated warehouse system.
Yeah, so it's 20 soccer pitches is what fit inside of one. So there's 4 apprentices in this picture, I think. Nope. One is taking the picture. And the chamber assistant director is in this picture. He was our tour guide. Their international, I'm going to call her trade director, is in the picture.
So the apprentice, the two on the left are
Yeah.
apprentices. The one on the right is an apprentice.
Yep.
In the back is Philip. He was the chamber, kind of like the deputy director. And then Daniela in the front they have ICS, so it's essentially their trade organization, international trade organization for Syria.
And this company has 100 apprentices. And they're
They also have like 8,000 employees
Yeah.
across the board.
Wow.
and this is in the apprentice training room. One apprentice, this one on the left is an industrial clerk. She was enjoying that because she got to experience all the different departments at the company. The next one is a mechatronics apprentice, and then the one on the right is a programmer coder apprentice. He is 24. I think this one is 22. This one maybe 26. They're, their 20s. The next, we talked about this already. The next company that we toured is Anton Parr. They make scientific instruments. So keep in mind, the language spoken here is German. And every person that we interacted with spoke English to us
Better than we.
did. I tried learning some German on Duolingo. I was able to talk to the headmaster of the school about her cat. That was as far as we were able to get. But the apprentices, this company in particular said that they want their apprentices to practice their English. So they encourage them to do the tours and to interact with people in English, because it's an important skill set for their business. So we got a tour of the manufacturing floor. An apprentice was guiding us all the way through the different stations, and in English. I had a side conversation with him where he was like a little uncomfortable. Am I doing okay? Can you understand me? Yes, you're perfect. Like, you speak 2 languages. I barely have one.
They did have different not incentives, but benefits for apprentices. I can't remember all of it, what they were, but both received like certain additional benefits, even like parking, dedicated parking for apprentices, which not every employee gets. So I think it was also this understanding of like, you're not getting paid a lot as an apprentice, so how do we make sure while you're here, you're getting some perks as well.
Kindergarten.
Yeah, so one of them offered they get kindergarten, which is like our pre-K.
Yep.
Is that what they said? So they do have, and then another employer had a full-on childcare center that they offered. The Anton Parr is an employer, a global employer that you probably never heard of, but you may have seen their name on things. They do medical and manufacturing and some other setting devices that measure liquids and gases. So it's everything from like the craft brewer who's measuring like sugar content or alcohol content in their brew, or again, some like a major medical facility that's measuring, or another engineering firm that's measuring contaminants in the air or something like that. So a lot of different devices they offer.
And you were saying those apprentices were in their 20s, but there could have been 16, 17, or right? Did they start that young?
So they were all in their, so they were kind of outside the norm, but I think that's where it depends on like, did they do their military or civil service first, or do they do it after? They were all in their 4th year, so they were nearing the end of their apprenticeship program.
I think we probably saw some 16, 17-year-olds at the vocational school that we went to.
Yeah.
And those students were there because they're apprentices, but they're at the place where they had to take the coursework.
Well, I know that was one of my questions for you when you asked before you went. I said, it's kind of like labor laws, like we can't get anyone under 18 into any manufacturing. You know, do they have apprentices that go into some of those hazardous fields that young, or how do they
I think their labor laws are
not?
a little bit more flexible than ours maybe, or if they exist at all.
Yeah, I would say they're not as, just given the environment, right? I mean, we do have some exemptions or exceptions if somebody's in an approved training program where they can go into settings under the age of 18 or 16. But in this case, it seemed much more like the norm.
Yeah, because that's interesting. Get them started in electrical
Right.
earlier, right?
Exactly.
And then this is a picture from the vocational school tour. This was like a year 4 advanced manufacturing class. They had maybe a 5-axis CNC machine. And so this person that you can see head on is a student, probably 25, showing us how they take a block of, I think that was aluminum, and turn it into something in the lathe. So he did all of the talking, but around the table, the person on the right here is the assistant director for the vocational school, and this woman here on the corner is the headmaster with the 2 cats. So those are, I have a ton of other pictures, but just in the interest of time, move on here. Nope, here are some more pictures. So this is the talent center. This is what the Chamber of Commerce, this is their talent center, but it's where they do the testing for the 7th and 8th graders. This is inside the training center that the Chamber of Commerce has built. It's again, you could think about it as a community college. And it's 4, 5, 6 stories tall, a brand new building. And they were building a new building next to it. This is the welding classroom. Tell that.
And this is like community college or adult CTE,
Yes.
right? So this is for adults specific.
Yeah. So if someone maybe wants to change careers, they can take a class here and pay for it, or their employer wants to upskill them or reskill them, they're sending them here for classes. And this is the plumbing classroom. They made lots of jokes about the clear pipes. And then we left here and went up on the roof where they had solar panels and their HVAC program. They had different, I don't know what the units are called, that condenser units of all ages and types, because their technicians are going to have to work on all different kinds of units of different ages. So that's the last picture. That's the last part of the visit. Anything else you
Picture
want
of
to
a
share?
toilet.
What? Any
So-
other questions about
Question,
this?
so the military aspect, the 6 months, is there like a set occupation that they do for those 6 months, or that's a really short time
I
compared
honestly
to
don't know.
compared to how
didn't-
we operate?
Yeah, we didn't get into the details. Just that it was a requirement.
I should say they, I got there a little early. Saturday, there was a day a couple of weeks ago that was a national holiday for them. And it's the anniversary of them celebrating their neutrality. So they put in their constitution that forever going forward, that Austria would be neutral in world conflicts. So that changed the nature of their military, but they still require some sort of service, civil service, whether you're in the military, doing something for 6 years, 6 months in their military, or you're doing something within the government. So I think that's probably why their system is a little different than ours.
But I don't know if, like those 6 months are learning a skill
Yeah.
or it's just boot camp for
Service.
6 months.
Yeah.
How did you leave? I'm guessing you left inspired, like saying, how do we do this? I can only assume though.
I left thinking, wow, their systems are so different than ours. What is it that we can do here to try to replicate some of those things, knowing that we're not going to be able to make every business pay to the Chamber of Commerce, and knowing that we're not going to be able to only have one Chamber of Commerce. We can't change those things, but I think I guess I just heard that there's a different way to do things. And then we have to take little bit by little bit. So like we can change how we talk about occupations. So let's not call them occupations, let's call them professions.
The 7th and 8th grade testing, what's that look like?
Yes.
What's that tell you
So-
about yourself?
Yes.
You know?
So is that
That's my
something
biggest-
that we can bring back here? I spent a lot of time thinking about that, like what's missing from our education to workforce systems? And it's that, I think, my opinion, it's that coordinated counseling and career exploration across the state. We'll do it. But how do we bring something like that here?
And just, there's, the trip was twofold. Because I think there's a potential that Vermont is looking at for like a sister state partnership, a formal sister state partnership with the state of Styria potentially. And the Agency of Commerce is building the sister state program with clear criteria. But a natural fit would be the state of Styria. And so part of this was a tour of their educational system and training system. Part of it was an economic focus as well. I also walked away too, thinking about maybe less about the programmatic side. I think Jay was focused very much on the programmatic side. And I think one of the things I walked away with is how do we encourage either Austrian businesses to want to set up shop in Vermont, or are there opportunities to share through some type of an exchange program apprentices? So an apprentice might be able to go spend 2 weeks or a month and vice versa. And I think as a state, we could be saying, how does this long-term partnership look in terms of what types of incentives or benefits do you get under our cooperative agreement, both from a training and economic side? And then I think, again, to Jay's point, we're not going to change the educational system. So at 15, you have to make this decision. But I do think the things we should be talking about is what are some of the things we could be doing to make technical education or apprenticeships more mainstream. And the governor has talked often about the stigma around it. And I think we've come a long way in breaking that down, but I think there's a lot of work to do in terms of making it more mainstream, where it's not a like, oh, if you can't make it in college, here's an alternate, a sub alternative. It's hey, there are two paths equally as important or rigorous. It's really based on the individual's preference, which way they work.
It seems like there's a generational shift
Yeah.
on that too, which I think is naturally happening, but I think it's something that it's supported. On the assessment, I know that some CTE centers, and it's sort of expanding more is the ASVAB. It's basically the military test is being used more in CT centers for that purpose. And it's something I've done research on. It seems to be really promising. I'm not sure how it compares with them. It sounds like that they have an actual physical.
Yeah,
component to it, which is cool.
there are 7 universities in Graz, and they partnered with one of the universities to kind of create the testing system and to validate the results and provide the report to the students. So it's like their custom
I'd love to see.
system. Yeah,
Really.
That's-
we didn't ask to see one, but Commissioner went through some of the tests.
Yeah, there's a photo of it, but I mean, some of it's just, some of it's obviously written or on the screen. And then some of it is, like hand-eye coordination, and, you know, you can operate a mini robot to do some work. So it was cool. So the way they do it is they actually have, schools from across the state come to Graz at dedicated times and bring, 50 students with them. And the 50 students, will go through the program, and mainly it's like they might pair 2 schools up if the classes are small, but often it's just one class from one school that's there for the half day or day.
Now, do all 7th and 8th graders go through that?
It's available to all, and I don't remember what the ages were, but it's not mandatory.
Okay. I mean, I think that would be a huge help to get people thinking. I mean, 7th, 8th grade is still young.
Yeah.
But I think that could help people think about their future, whereas I think an 18-year-old is way younger now than they were 20 years ago.
Yeah.
It's way younger. So I don't know if you could get them thinking a little, I mean, not that you want them to have to grow up early, but I mean, 18, if you don't go to college, you go in the workforce, you're not a kid anymore.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna move us on.
Hey Jay, I have one quick question. Did Austria take anything away from how we do things that they want to incorporate in their system?
They were, I think, more interested in the trade opportunities for connecting their sectors to businesses in Vermont.
We also had done a deep
Yeah.
dive on our apprenticeship model
Yeah.
with Austria. Right, so I mean, we had general conversation, but this was more about the Austrian model.
Yeah.
And we haven't, one of the things coming out of this is we now have a really good connection with the chamber director and the deputy there, the International Trade Organization, and we met with their minister of commerce, and she has like 20 different areas, but it would be similar to like Secretary Curley's counterpart over there for the state of Styria. So I think the next piece coming out of this is, okay, where do we go from here, right? We can obviously keep taking information back and using it for us, but they need to see the equal benefit in that partnership. So I think the next opportunity would be to host them over here as well and offer.
I would say, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago, we had a German apprenticeship student come over here. He worked for us for, I can't remember, it was 3 months, 6 months. I can't remember.
How did that connection happen?
It was something to do with, trying to think. Sanders was doing something with Germany at that time and really that's when he was really pushing the apprenticeship.
Mhm.
And it happened through that.
Okay.
I do think the Austrians consulted or advised the Office of Apprenticeship on their the proposed rulemaking that they put out last year.
You're talking at the
At the
US federal level?
Yeah. Hi, Derek.
Sorry, I'm late.
Problem.
All right. I'm going to move us on here to another part of the update section, which is program monitoring. So one of the things that the Office of Apprenticeship and the regional office in Boston of the Department of Labor do is come up and monitor. So last week they were here for how many hours? 8, 6?
Yeah. It's one day.
So the purpose of this visit, I think, was, and correct me if I'm wrong, Sarah, was that we passed Act 55 that updated the apprenticeship system, and they were coming here to monitor us as a state apprenticeship agency to make sure our law was in compliance with what their rules and expectations are for a state apprenticeship agency. Right, so a couple of things that were good that came out of this. We're still waiting for a formal write-up from them. One of the things that apprenticeship agencies are authorized to do is create our own occupations that are outside of whatever the federal government may have set up. They were pleased that, with a couple of exceptions, our occupations are in conformance with their expectations. The two unique ones that we have are tramway maintenance technician that works on the ski lifts and state trooper. So there's maybe another one in there, but those are the two that have the most apprentices that are outside of their system. And that they were pleased to hear that reviews have started on apprenticeship sponsors. So that's something that we have thus far not been doing, but started last month.
What is, just for the collective, what would be what's part of the review that?
Yeah, so the reviews are, well, we're going through one now. So it's really a 3-part. We do a desk review, just looking through the records and rapids to make sure that the apprentices are all registered correctly. We have all their demographics, all the information in there. That they have their safety, proof of their safety training, proof of their hours they've worked, and then are enrolled in the related instruction at TSU or wherever they're going. So we do that part, and then we do a site visit, and we need to make sure we have all the the labor laws, the posters up, that it's a safe and clean work environment. And then we have a checklist. It's a tool. We have a tool checklist that we go through. We just have to kind of verify all the pieces that are required.
Yeah.
So wages, we check what their wages are, what they, are being paid, what they said in the tennis agreement,
Yep.
so on.
I think the important part of that is that there's a dialogue between us and the sponsor about how things are going, what's working, what's not working.
Right, because it's totally different now from what I know. You know what I mean? It's always been, state's always been active in it.
So
Yeah.
we're building back capacity now.
Mhm.
The team is fully staffed, and I think we're getting back to maybe a position that we used to be in.
Yeah, so the regulations say we need to do it on a 5-year cycle. So we're supposed to do every new registered program as a review in 1 year, and then after that, it's on a 5-year review cycle. We have a little bit to do to catch up, but then we'll be in good shape.
And then under concerns, they wanted to make sure that we were aware that sometime in the next couple of weeks, it sounds like the U.S. Department of Labor will be releasing their final rules for apprenticeship programs. That will mean that we're going to have to make some technical corrections to the statute. They were very interested in our definition of youth apprenticeship, mostly trying to understand why it's defined the way that it is. They were looking for us to make some modifications in the statute that speak to reciprocity of the national programs and how they how we would recognize them here. They were grilling us a little bit about the ratio provision that's in the statute. We're gonna end up talking about that. If not this meeting, then well, it will be this meeting and continue into the next meeting. And so, you know, there's a list of concerns that we'll have to address mostly through some technical corrections and policy work that we'll bring back to you. So once we have the final thing, we'll bring it back in here, but just so that you all know, the review happened. They're going to write up their findings and then we'll bring it back to you. And then the next steps are we have to outline how we're going to address all of their, whatever the concerns are that they've raised. Next one in terms of update. Sorry, I didn't make a slide for this. Next week is National Apprenticeship Week. So the governor has signed a proclamation making it so. Monday, the theme is Youth and Young Adult Apprenticeship Day. So do you want to talk about that?
Yes. So we have an event. We're going up to visit St. Johnsbury Academy. They're one of two schools that are offering the kind of the dual enrollment that they can actually do the electrical and plumbing first year apprenticeship while they're still in school. So we have 30 electrical and 12 plumbing students that we're going to go and congratulate and hand out. We did make apprenticeship cards for them, which is, I think they'll be excited to have their little laminated card. And they're starting to be able to track their hours this year under their licensed instructor, which is great because when they do get picked up by an employer, which most will by the end of the school year, they'll have some of that prior credit already assigned. So we're going to go and bring some donuts and cider and just do a little reception, get a tour of their school and their lab and see them at work. So that's really exciting for Vermont.
And then Tuesday is Registered Apprenticeship in New and Emerging Industries and Around the Globe. These are themes selected by the national office.
Yep, so we're going to focus on teacher apprenticeship as the new emerging field. So we're hosting a reception along with VREC, Vermont Rural Education Collaborative, and AOE and Vermont NEA, the union, are kind of all the partners on that one. So that's up at is it North Country Career Center? Is that what it's called up in St. Northbrook? Yes, so we're hosting it there, inviting all of the 28 teacher apprentices, their mentors, as well as the administrators from their schools. And, kind of a double chance to congratulate them, but also get some feedback about what's working, how we could do things, a little bit differently going forward, because this is the first pilot year of that apprenticeship.
Okay, and then Wednesday is expanding registered apprenticeship to underserved populations.
So this one is really high tech, which is now, what is it? What's their new, they changed their IAA.
Institute for American Apprenticeships.
So they're really kind of taking the lead. They're hosting an event in our Burlington Job Center. So they'll have a panel that I will participate on that evening. And they're inviting some former apprentices as well as some local business representatives to kind of just come and talk about registered apprenticeship.
And then Thursday is Women in Apprenticeship.
Yeah, so Thursday and Friday are really, rather than events, they're more just really social media, some press releases. We did some interviewing and write-ups of some different women that are current apprentices, so that we're going to be putting out pictures and highlighting some people. And I think on Friday is the veterans.
Yep.
So we also done some interviewing there and putting out some information, I think, to really more businesses is going to be our target on how they can support veterans through the GI Bill and through Skill Bridge program to be able to kind of combine apprenticeship and training models and take advantage of the benefits to support veterans.
Okay, so that's our plan. So that's, any questions about any of that or comments? Okay, I'm going to move on to the board discussion section. So there's sort of 3 items in this that we're trying to seed a discussion around. So as I noted from the review, the federal government is curious, I'll say, about the ratio that's stated in statute, and also that we have a variance process. So we're going to try to focus today on a discussion of ratio variance. So at a high level, the purpose of the ratio is to make sure that the apprentice is supported and learning and working safely while they're learning this occupation. Whatever it is. So we've said it's historically been 1-to-1. You have to have a master licensed or a journey licensed person, 1-to-1 apprentice. I think that's in the licensing rules that are not managed by us. But there are also other occupations that, or professions, I'm going to start calling them, out there. So like computer coders and programmers, do they have to have a 1-to-1? Could be different. So just have to think about the different kinds of professions that are out there that can be learned through apprenticeship. That's the kind of foundation of this discussion. The statute currently says your role as a board is to advise the commissioner on variance requests. So this is where an employer or sponsor might come and say, well, you know, we have a great safety record. I'd like to take on 2 more apprentices to be able to train more people and help to, you know, to take on all the work that's out there. Those would come here. I'm going to have you talk about what you are thinking the process would be.
Yeah. Well, I think it's important to note that in Act 55, it's written that we are currently 1-to-1 until though they get to, if one of the apprentices finishes their first year and hits the 2,000 hour mark, then it can go to 2-to-1. And then beyond that, it would need to go to a request. So I think that was the part that the reviewers, the federal team was kind of questioning. They said, well, why did you pick 2,000? I guess some states don't do that until 6,000. Like in their last year, they allow the 2-to-1. And they said maybe for some occupations, they would suggest that's fine, but maybe the hazardous occupations, they might look at differently and not allow the 2-to-1, at least after 1 year. So I think those are some of the things that they want us to talk about and kind of consider. So basically, I just went down through the language of Act 55 and those pieces that it says, like, why do you want this? What's your safety plan? What's your safety history? And kind of just created a template form for that. How many current apprentices do you have? How many current licensed individuals on staff do you have? And they can give us the number so we can verify their license number. So that's kind of where we started.
Yeah, and they were also giving examples of like, is this per job site? Or is this a mathematical ratio of the company as a whole? So you have somebody working in Burlington at a job site. Is it one journey worker to one apprentice on that job site? Or is there one person in the Burlington area that can go to different sites and supervise? Like, they're posing these good questions.
Right. Like years ago, I don't know, Jeff, do you remember before the ratio was the 1-to-1? It was way different before we got that changed.
I believe it was maybe 2-to-1 or 3-to-1.
Yeah, so years ago, we needed variances in the past.
Yeah.
And so I'd have to do a letter with how many licenses, how many apprentices, safety record, any FOSHA violations. And so we'd have to go through all that process. Now with the 1-to-1, I don't need it. We haven't needed that for years, but I used to have to. And it was, here it's 1-to-1. It would be not like a journeyman in Burlington being able to see apprentices at multiple. It was on site, yeah. Because an apprentice, even a first year that's just finished 2,000 hours, I mean, really, they shouldn't be on a job site alone.
Does if you remember if it was a form or you said you just had to write
It was a letter.
You just had to, there must have just had some things that you had to include in the
Yes.
letter.
Yes.
So we're trying to get,
And it was years
simplify it a
ago,
little bit to a form. but
which is
certainly-
great,
Yeah.
right?
But it's interesting because one of the questions that I think I typed it on there on my draft and Jay came back and said, well, what does that mean? I said, well, I don't know. I just copied it because it says, please provide an occupational safety analysis that describes the specific risks to your apprentices, journey workers and the public. And what you will do to mitigate. So like, where do they get that from? Like, it's like, we don't want to put something on a form and put it back on the business that they say, well, we don't know how to answer that
Right.
question, right?
That would be a tough.
Is that from the
Right.
state statute?
So that, yeah, that's right from the statute, is like that they need to tell us how they will provide an occupational safety
Yeah.
analysis to describe the specific risks. So
Sounds
that's
like we need to make another template.
Right.
Well, this, I think the thinking on that one was that, that OSHA would be able to provide an employer-specific report of like, well, no, this employer has had an accident reported every week for the last, making things up, 3 weeks,
Mhm.
or, one a month for the last 2 years. And that's not indicating that they have a safety program that helps people not get injured.
I'm thinking back then I needed to give our EMR rating that we get from from our insurance company. And that is, would go off from your OSHA violations or, actually, no, that's probably more your, injury, yeah, on job injuries.
So you're thinking, Jay, rather than it's a question for them, it's something we have to check, that we would check with
Yeah.
OSHA for.
And that when we bring the variance request to the board, we say, here's the other information that we were able to, where we have Dirk as the workers' comp director can sign off on the request and not share the really specific information, or could say, I don't support this, instead of us bringing the company's laundry to a public meeting.
Yeah.
So, I guess other thoughts about, should it be differentiated by occupation? Like, are there certain occupations where it doesn't matter from a safety perspective because the person is sitting at a computer typing, and
Definitely.
it would matter from a perspective of quality work and quality learning, but not safety?
Depends on what they're coding. Depends on what they're coding.
Yes.
Um,
Jeff, did you? Oh, Dirk.
I think of like the LNAJ, and we have like up to 6 people providing direct personal care in situations where people can get hurt. So I do think like we have to look at different types of employers, but also have to be like reasonable, because we do need more people trained than we're training right now. So if you were like too restrictive, as someone who's done carpentry stuff, like a lot of the things that apprentices are doing, like it's not like they're hooking up, super high voltage all the time, or things that are like incredibly dangerous. So I do think we need that ability for variance in there.
Yeah, so is it based on the profession or the type of work they're performing? Right, because to Derek's point, they may not always be performing a hazardous task.
Because if you did profession, I don't know how you'd break it down into actually what they're doing, because, high voltage, that may be something once every year that the apprentice would be working with somebody on, or, yeah, that's a tough one.
That's a tough
That's
one.
a tough
And
one.
in fact, we got a request last week from an out-of-state company coming in and asked what our rules were around that. And then their follow-up, this was from an attorney representing a business. The follow-up question was, and how are you going to monitor to make sure they're following that, and and I was like, oh, I don't even know how to answer that one, because what are we gonna do? Go out to every site and
That's a tough one. You may
Right.
have to do
Well, yeah,
profession.
and this is where the overlap with the licensing rules come, like with nursing, they may have requirements that we're not aware of. We can't, I don't know that we
Right.
know of everything.
they're the ones that monitor that,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
They can do site visits and check.
The inspectors from the licensing boards for electrical and plumbing will go out. But I think this is also the gray area of like, it's an apprenticeship program, is it our responsibility to monitor the apprentice ratios, or is it the employer, the licensing board's responsibility to enforce their rules? I think there's probably a little place for us to come to some agreement about that, but then it gets to, well, what is the right ratio, and is it by profession, is it by employer, is it, if it's by employer, then it gets even more complicated
Right.
because we're gonna
Definitely.
have 300 different ratios.
That's a tough one.
I assume they're talking like OPR licensing, Office of Professional Regulations,
Um,
probably.
Department of Public Safety is the primary one with electrical and plumbing. But
Yeah.
there may be some with OPR.
Yeah, like nurses are through OPR. So I think, I mean, it would be worth having a conversation with them. I mean, in my work with them in the past, they are always very happy to maintain control over something. And they do have a pretty robust team for investigations. So I think that would be a good.
Yeah. So they have requirements like for how many has on a site apprentice? Do they have a ratio?
Yes,
They do.
yeah. Like the licensing board's pretty good about having things.
So
But
how
that would
can
be in the
we,
electrical field.
right, and then each field.
Because
would be the
if each
different.
manufacturer or manufacturer is gonna be
That's
different.
totally
than
different.
plumbing,
Yeah.
Electrical and anything licensed, so.
But don't we-
Yeah,
I mean, don't
plumbing
we
and
have to
electrical
follow
would
the
probably be
licensing then? How
together.
can we be off what the licensing? If they're saying it has to be 1-to-1, we can't come in and say they can have 2-to-1. Right?
I think they would be looking at, did we grant a variance, and is there a record of that variance? So that would be, I think, maybe what they're looking for, but also
We need
like,
to-
this is that gray area of, let's be clear what they're thinking is.
You know, and one reason you needed variances a lot in the past was to get students enrolled in the apprenticeship program. And if they weren't enrolled, they weren't get, even though they were working, they didn't get full credit for all hours if they weren't enrolled in the program. And you couldn't get them enrolled if, yes.
Yeah.
So you could just tuition them for class. So they wouldn't be registered, but they would be able to go, but they weren't getting full credit for their hours. You know,
So-
things have changed since
Right.
then, but
So they would just be working as laborers on the job site? So is that allowed? An electrical? They can hire a laborer who's not a registered apprentice?
I don't know. We don't do laborers, but even when they weren't registered, I had them track their hours. They did everything normal. It's just
Yeah.
that they weren't, that you didn't get your full hours always, you know, it's just different.
Yeah. But almost to me, it sounds like we would need some input from these, for the licensed
Mhm,
professions. Like, we definitely need to know what they would support. I mean,
Yep.
because I don't think we want to contradict what they're saying.
Yep.
Right.
At
I
least
echo
in the
that from
trades, you need to line up the licensing board with the ratios and the apprenticeships.
I echo that as well from a healthcare perspective. I think it could vary based on profession and licensing board, and would defer to some of my clinical experts here on what that looks like in each area.
And as far as electrical and plumbing, they meet every 2 months, just in case you wanted to. And it's the first Tuesday, it'll be the first Tuesday of December is their next meeting.
Okay, so thanks for informing us on this. We'll go back and
More information, I think, with words first. I mean, it still won't answer all the, like you said, there's a lot of professions, occupations that are not licensed that we still need to come up with our own internal policy for. I think that's the big one to start.
I think we want to make the variance process as clear as possible. So companies who do want to take on more are able to do that and do it safely.
And it even came up with the teachers this year, that some of the schools were really having trouble finding the mentor teachers to take on that extra piece. And so it was asked, could we have two, teacher apprentices under one? And currently, the way it's written, it's no, but that was a real struggle for some of these small schools
Mhm.
in the Northeast Kingdom. So that's something to
Yeah.
think about. And
Yeah, I think once we expand to like paraeducators, it would be easier because they're in a classroom with the classroom teacher. And so, I mean, that's dependent on the teacher agreeing to do the extra legwork. But
Now, on the teacher apprenticeship, what do they become through this apprenticeship?
yeah, so currently they already have a bachelor's degree and it's getting them licensed. It's getting them through the Vermont
Oh,
licensure.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
yeah,
So that was the first, going beyond that is
Mhm.
gonna be more of a hurdle because it's getting them free piece that they need to.
Yeah. which are,
So they had a degree in something, but it wasn't, okay.
you just have a bachelor's degree.
Yeah.
But we actually are making some really good progress with the state university campuses. We had a really good roundtable with their head departments. And interim Secretary Saunders has actually set up a meeting for a few of us to meet with the chancellor of the college
Yeah.
system. Sounds like she's supportive of it. So
That's good.
that'll be, I think, December 4th. Million, I will be on that. And from the sounds of it, it seems like it's really good timing with sort of their fiscal calendar this year. So I'm hoping by the next meeting, we'll have some tangible results on that. But it's definitely the closest we've been so far. So it's
good.
really good. And that would be a bachelor program, both for paraeducators and school staff to complete their bachelor's, as well as discussing that CTE and high school pathway throughout the full process. So, yeah.
Okay, you get what you need?
Yeah, I think it's definitely to be continued, but
Yeah.
I think you're right, connecting with the licensing board, bringing back some information.
I'm trying to find my contacts with OPR, but I just sent you the list of the professions that they cover.
And I made a little PowerPoint that shows all of their occupations and the ones that are apprenticeable in our system. Okay, so we're gonna move on. Next discussion is about pre and youth apprenticeship. So we're gonna review some definitions. Today, we're gonna focus on pre-apprenticeship requirements, and then we're gonna review a draft. I'm gonna say application form for certifying a pre-apprenticeship. So in Act 55, a youth apprenticeship program is defined as a program registered, we're going to say certified, by the department as provided in section 1124. Youth apprenticeship programs of this title or is applicable by the federal
Jake,
office.
Can I just ask a
Apprenticeship.
question
Yeah.
on the ratio thing real quick?
Yeah.
Because I think it applies to this too.
Okay.
It would just be helpful as we're talking about this, like, I know the feds were interested, but what we don't want to do, right, is get to the 11th inning, and have them be like, yeah, that doesn't work for us, right? And now you gotta go back in time, right? So I think just making sure like we're really clear on what they will support or won't support. And I don't mind taking their suggestions or recommendations, but I think we just need to make sure that if it's something that they're going to say no,
Mhm.
that we know what that line is, so that we don't get down and around the corner.
Yeah.
And that is a question, I guess, for you is like, because they do, so I actually printed out their guidelines for
Okay.
ratio, but they call them guidelines for reviewing apprenticeship to journey worker ratio, but what does that mean guideline? I mean, they are clear on what they suggest, but up to what level do we have to follow their guidelines?
And they, I think, want us to be aware of it. That's, I think, mostly for their Office of Apprenticeship staff across the United States. The way the system is currently set up, they allow a state apprenticeship agency to create its own kind of ratio requirements. We sent this to them well in advance of it being taken up by the legislature, but they didn't get back to us. And so
And it may
I
have
think,
been that they couldn't.
Yeah.
They didn't have enough information.
I think that they're willing, I want us to think through it more and probably make sure that at least doesn't stray too far from what they're saying here. They
Yeah.
have an interest in keeping state systems mostly similar.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think we'll come back with here's what we're hearing from the licensing boards. Here's what we're thinking, and then we probably also have to wait for them to release the new regulations, and then that might even say, a state apprenticeship agency can't set its own ratios, and then problem solved. But they weren't.
Right.
They were being tight-lipped about what was going to be in the release. So, Section 1124 tells us that a youth apprenticeship program is one that prepares a youth apprentice for acceptance into an apprenticeship program and is designed for youth apprentices who will start the program while still enrolled in high school. In our system, we're trying to talk about 16, 17-year-olds that are in CTE programs. Because they're already in a program that's likely aligned with apprenticeship. They're getting technical instruction. They probably have some work-based learning or on-the-job experience. So we're not talking about that today. We're going to talk about pre-apprenticeship. The way it's defined is a training model or program that prepares individuals for acceptance into an apprenticeship program, and that is registered, we'll say certified, by the department as provided in section 1123. Pre-apprenticeship program of this title or is applicable from the federal program office. So this intended audience is more broad than students who are in high school. This intended audience can be focused on different populations of people. It could be for adults. It can be for adults who don't have a high school diploma, and we can tie it up with an integrated education and training program that the adult education providers have to do as part of their federal WIOA funding. So we're talking about a program that will get someone ready for a registered apprenticeship program and help them meet the minimum requirements that employers have set for their program.
What would be some of those minimum that a pre-apprenticeship would
What are
have?
some of your requirements for hiring an apprentice?
Really, for an apprentice in the electrical, we train them for everything, really.
Right.
So I can't, the only thing I would ever think would be if they needed better math skills, you could help with that in a pre-apprentice, because
If it's necessary for that the company conducts business in English, that we're taking a set of English language learners, new Americans, refugees, immigrants, and building their, helping them learn English through some trade specific, stuff like that. So, or helping them get a driver's license or
Right.
whatever it is that the employer says, we have to have this. And it's taking the people who don't have it to get them to it.
Maybe some of those soft skills, employability skills,
Mhm.
right? That they're just
Right.
not, they've never had a job before. They've never,
Right.
Yeah.
right? Even helping them get the resume and get,
Exactly.
learning some of those life skills
Mhm.
too in preparation. Some basic safety and tool exposure, right, is always good.
And
Confidence, I think, like when we talk about Vermont Works for Women,
Right.
if we can introduce it in a more safe, supportive way, support, the profession.
I see, Ronnie has her hand up.
Well, and I agree and echo what everyone is saying as far as how we run our pre-apprenticeship programs. They are fairly loosely defined as far as what's needed in them. It's usually employer dependent, but basic hand tools, construction, math, blueprint reading are things that we try to focus on, as well as all those employability skills. So people are just ready to start. Most employers tackle, skill-based specific trainings. Historically, though, to access funding under a pre-apprenticeship program, you did have to have components of an industry recognized credential, at least one, as part of your program. And we've always used OSHA 10 or 30 as part of that.
So just so I understand the kind of pipeline too, are the people that would be in a pre-apprenticeship program, have they already identified an employer or an apprenticeship program that they want to go into?
Maybe
No.
they're interested in a profession or they're trying to explore that. But parallel tracks. Youth apprenticeships are for students in CTE centers, and we could maybe say pre-apprenticeship is for people who didn't get the chance to be in a CTE program.
Yeah.
And so we're trying to support a population of people who didn't know about it, weren't interested in it, whatever their reason was as an adult, and get them ready. The important piece here is the relationship with the employers that have that are sponsoring programs. You need to know what's in the pre-apprenticeship program. You need to have an opportunity to advise on the content, and then have an opportunity to say, once someone completes, yes, we'll hire them. We'll give them an interview. We're going to grant advanced standing. We're going to make it so they don't have to take this credential course or some other course. So basically, there's 8 elements that are identified in the statute for a pre-apprenticeship program. I'm going to start from the left and work my way across the top line and go to the bottom line. But the written agreement, the program is carried out by a sponsor. So we could think Vermont Works for Women, that has a written agreement with at least one sponsor of an apprenticeship program. That the active advisory board, the program, the pre-apprenticeship program, engages in active advisory partnership with an industry leader or sector partnership to inform the training and education services that are in the pre-apprenticeship program. Sufficient demand, that there is enough demand in an apprenticeship program at the completion of the pre-apprenticeship to support a transition from the program to an apprenticeship program. So it couldn't be like that we've designed a pre-apprenticeship program for 10 people and there's only one opportunity at the end. There has to be enough for it to be worth the investment of those pre-apprentices' time.
When you say design a pre-apprenticeship program, so this is the other part that I've always struggled with. So we're obviously helping to register or certify the pre-apprenticeship program. We might help design a pre-apprenticeship program, or we might find if we wanted a pre-apprenticeship program that didn't currently exist, we could work with a third party to help create a pre-apprenticeship program.
Yeah, so a few years ago, when I started here, there was a big discussion about CDL drivers. We don't have enough CDL drivers, and it's hard to get companies to take on CDL as an apprenticeship program, but it's possible. And then there was a group of refugees that came in that were interested in CDL, didn't speak English. So I was trying to advocate for a pre-apprenticeship program that was focused on building English language skills around the tractor trailer truck and around the commercial driver's license. California does it. It's a complicated program and requires a lot of money to make it happen and a lot of attention. And so it didn't get any traction, but that's an example.
So let's imagine for just a brief minute that we're like California.
Okay.
But
7th largest economy in the world.
Yeah. In that, like, let's say we had just massive amounts of money, right? And we could say, could we as a department, or let's say this board decided, hey, we really want a pre-apprenticeship program in X CDL drivers, right? And let's say we had $500,000 that we could put towards the creation of a CDL program. Is that something where we could do like an like does California do an RFP saying, hey, we want an apprenticeship, a pre-apprenticeship program in X, but we need a provider. And so you put out an RFP, you look at bids, and they're selecting essentially who they're going to contract with to provide funding to support a pre-apprenticeship program.
That would be one version. Is there an off-the-shelf solution out there in the United States that they can bring here? The other alternative would be there's a partner organization in Vermont that's interested in working in this space. They get a grant to create it or a contract to make it.
Yeah.
Like with Ronnie, what she does with women in construction.
Yeah.
I mean, is that required for them to come into construction? No, but it's a huge help.
Well,
It's
and
a
that's
huge help.
And I just put it in the chat. Pre-apprenticeship programs are really focused on those with barriers to accessing these other programs. And so if somebody has the opportunity and already knows they want to be an electrician, they're going to probably go directly to the apprenticeship route. Pre-apprentice is really to help those with barriers get to that phase to be ready for the apprenticeship route. So whether it's language or remedial
really
skills.
thinking about like, what is the mechanism or role of the board or the department in helping to foster growth in pre-apprenticeship programs, right? So, you know, Vermont Works for Women did not start because the Department of Labor, you know, put out an RFP and offered funding. But, you know, again, what we've talked a lot about is if we're looking at employer-driven education and training programs, right? So what is the need? Where are our fastest growing industries? What are the needs of those employers in those industries? And should that drive where we invest or promote pre-apprenticeship, apprenticeship programs? You know, how do we as a board and as a state have a role in kind of like encouraging programs in those areas?
Yeah.
I think a
Well,
lot of
and
it
just as a quick example too with that, as far as focusing on where's the demand, you know, Vermont Works for Women, we're starting a new pre-apprenticeship program in semiconductor and advanced manufacturing. That comes from employers saying this is what we truly need. We're not getting women in these fields. And so we are coming at it from okay, let's look at underemployed or unemployed women who could benefit from this. And what are those barriers just to get them, because they could go directly to the employer and get that training right away, but they're not. And so what is that mechanism in between? And I think that's where there are a lot of community-based or even just other programs in the state right now that could be that mechanism for the pre-apprenticeship based on the demand.
Well,
But it is a funding part too. I mean, we only were able to do this through federal DOL funding, which is also how we started the construction pre-apprenticeship 5 years ago.
Well, and you know, our biggest problem at the department level is dedicated non-WIOA funding, where we can help invest it in these programs. And, you know, again, it's really on a year-to-year basis, either what the governor or the legislature decides they want to build into their budget. And, you know, we're looking at, we've proposed an expansion in funding for apprenticeships, and not to go too far down that rabbit hole because it hasn't even been presented to the governor yet. And we're going to have some hard decisions, I think, to make as a state in terms of where we make our investments with the limited funding we have. But, you know, our hope was looking at things like how to expand apprenticeships, or how to expand work-based learning, or how to expand work like innovation in workforce programs. And those were kind of the three areas we looked at. And I'm assuming we would consider pre-apprenticeships under that apprenticeship.
Derek has his hand up.
And then I think you also.
what do we use for criteria for like deciding what apprenticeships we want to fund? Because I think that's like the big piece is having some guardrails on like what makes it worth it and how do we know we should invest our money here? So
I think we could decide to relate it back to the state workforce development boards, 8 goals. There's different sectors identified in those goals. Or, in the next meeting, I think we can present about the strategic plan that's been drafted for apprenticeship, and in there decide that that's where it's identified which areas to focus on.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think as well as coming from businesses and industry saying where they feel the need, I think we're also getting a lot of information from educators in school of seeing which populations they feel that need the supports. I think some of our adult educators have reached out and said, we're working with a group of English language learners who, we need some, build a pathway, build a bridge for certain populations, higher ability. So I think some of those partners are reaching out to say, how can we build a pre-apprenticeship to help get, people in this underserved population better supported on the way to apprenticeship. So I think it's gonna be a little bit from both sides, right? We obviously need the companies and the businesses to support it, but we also need to look at the populations that we want to support.
I would also assume our biggest hurdle, other than funding, is just awareness, right? Like we're just, again, it's come a long way in the past 2-3 years, but the registered apprenticeship programs, registered pre-apprenticeship programs, and the value of those programs is not universally known across the.
Yep.
Like they hear about them, but I don't think that,
Doesn't
it doesn't always register to them that this is a good option. And I was thinking about the tour we did of Alliance Group. And just the fact that, they ran into that issue of they would love to have like summer interns, like young summer interns. And they couldn't figure out how to get around the child labor laws. And so again, they're very familiar with the apprenticeship program. I don't think it'd be very hard for them to create a pre-apprenticeship program. And so again, it's more that they just weren't aware that was a potential solution.
For us in healthcare, it's also a classic, what comes first, the chicken or the egg scenario. I would love a pre-apprenticeship program to prep individuals, but we don't necessarily have registered apprenticeship programs in place. So some flexibility to have those result in employment pathway program and or apprenticeship versus just leading to apprenticeship would be very helpful for us as we get registered apprenticeships more off the ground.
Jerry, if you ever figure out which came first, you let me know.
I know, right?
Well, and to your point too, Commissioner, around, what's available to, you don't know what you don't know. And so I know a lot of the female youth that we work with, they have no idea. Not all students need the pre-apprenticeship program, but they do need awareness on what exists out there. And I think that's a big piece of it too. And it's definitely school by school, guidance counselor by guidance counselor, as far as that message.
I'm curious on this may be wishful thinking, right? I don't know whether we'll ever have a center, right, where all the kids in Vermont go to do their testing. But it does make me think of, again, a low risk, no expectation set, but how do we even just get them to do, aptitude or ASVAB testing, right? Like just, again, when we're at a younger age, right? Like the biggest issue I always hear is that we start too late, right? We're too far down the road by the time we start engaging them about occupations, careers, or professions. And so is there a way to work with the agency of ed, right? Even if it's, and again, it may be that it's not mandatory, right? But it's something where it's a co-partnership where we say, okay, we're gonna, try to build into, 6th, 7th, 8th, 8th grade, maybe even 5th grade, like some type of aptitude exploration, right? So it's not a test. It's just, something fun they can
Yeah.
do to get their mind going.
Well, and I think pre-apprenticeship can also be really exploratory. I think we've kind of thrown around the idea of like a summer boot camp for between sophomore and junior year, somewhere in there to just a summer program, a 6-week pre-apprenticeship that say we take construction and it's a little, maybe they do the OSHA 10, right? You're learning your safety, but then they get to go out and visit in electrical and plumbing and carpentry and heavy equipment and just see some different pieces, right? And as long as, again, we have that relationship that they could then apply for any one of those apprenticeships after it meets the requirements for a pre-apprenticeship, right? If it's leading to something. So it can also be a way to just kind of learn about apprenticeship and the different options, right?
Box number 5, mentoring, career exploration and exposure is a required.
Well,
element.
and I think at least not to just start the conversation or start the mind thinking, right? Like it doesn't always have to be, it's great that we do these, right? But they're very these kind of career fairs, right? Where we have the heavy machinery or the exploration, like those are awesome, right? But they take a lot of work, energy, resources, and Ronnie does an amazing one, but you're kind of capped at how many students you can get there at like 400 or 450, right? So if we could find even something that just starts them thinking about it, even within the classroom where, a teacher can say, okay, we're going to dedicate, half a class to this, that may be of interest too.
Derek has put in a comment, make sure you start before 10th grade. Lots of opportunities become available in 10th grade and students need to be ready. And Ronnie's making a plug. Girls Lifts launching inclusive futures and trades. You can read about it there. But just in the interest of time here, these other items that another element is including paid and unpaid work experience. Another element is incorporating diploma and GED attainment when it's applicable. And then the final one is written agreements for advanced standing. And that's where the employer relationship is important and necessary because the employer is saying, if you finish this program, I will give you X number of hours toward your on-the-job training. I will give you X number of hours credit toward coursework, whatever that looks like. But that's another important piece of how the system should work. So those are the elements. I'm going to stop sharing this PowerPoint and I'm going to share with you the form. I can. So this is the draft form that's been created to apply for, again, we're just calling it registration or certification. You want to talk through this while I scroll, Sarah? Or?
Sure, yeah. So again, it's really just collecting all the pieces, right? So it's collecting, where, when, who, all the core pieces of a pre-apprenticeship design. And then really it's going to get into a little bit down further, the employer partners. Again, that's where it becomes key. And I think there are a lot of great programs happening that we just need to get this last piece to really get the employer to sign on. And I think we even wrote this as a memorandum of agreement. And I stole that from other states. That's the way they were doing it. Because really that's all it is, right? We need the employer to support the program and say, yes, we're going to work with you to at least give, your graduates or your completers an interview or come in and maybe talk at the end of your program about where they could go beyond the apprenticeship. So the form really is just asking all those questions about who the partners are. It does not have a length of time requirement that I could find anywhere. And I think we asked that kind of nationally and there isn't really a required time. It also says it can be paid or unpaid, but does need to have that work connection with an employer in there. We'll make sure to send this out after too, so you can read it closer for the people
whenever we talk about MOAs,
Mm.
our contract specialist,
Ah.
always
Yeah.
raises concerns around some AOA policies.
Okay.
So just want to flag that. I'm
Yeah.
not sure if that's something you guys have this current organizational structure.
We still have those rules applied to us.
Yeah.
So can we just take that off then and just not call it
That's
that?
kind of what we
We
do.
do.
It's all okay. It's
Okay.
MOA, it's, yeah.
It's just
MO,
an agreement.
yeah, something else.
Well, but I think this is a template that we're providing for the program and the sponsors. to-
Between each other, right? It's not
Between each other. It's not, it's not for us. This is just evidence that there's
that there's
agreement and some.
Yeah.
I just know whenever I put that in, that just delays everything. for a month.
Good to know. Good to know.
Just a month. Okay, so we've reviewed this. We're gonna, you've seen it. We're gonna send it out. And in the next meeting, we will come back to this discussion to see if there's anything else that should be added or anything that needs to be clarified. And then we can wrap up this kind of process discussion for pre-apprenticeship and then start putting it out there so that organizations can submit it.
Yeah, because our goal is, we're cleaning up our website. Our goal is to get the apprenticeship pages worked on this December. And we really want to have a page for pre-apprenticeship would be awesome. So we could really start to have the application form, but then also start to advertise the programs that are happening. Because there are some great programs happening that they really are pre-apprenticeships. They're just not certified yet.
Yeah.
But we just want to be able to start market and spread the word.
So then that's the end of we're a little over time.
That brings us to board questions, topics of interest. Let's see if anybody has anything they want to bring up. The one thing I'll add, I don't have much to say on it, other than it's something we will be watching very closely, will be the impacts of the administration change at the national level on our programs, which we fully anticipate there will be. I don't know what that means necessarily for apprenticeship. I just know that, like, when we think about our federal funding, it becomes much more contentious and potentially less funding coming to us under WIOA or unemployment insurance or some of our other programs, especially under what we saw under the first Trump administration. So I don't know how that will play out going forward, but we'll be monitoring that, certainly share back everybody here any changes we hear coming our way. And also, I think I'd love to see USDOL get their final rule out the door. But I also know that they are probably a little hesitant or not sure which way the winds are blowing, and that may impact the final that they're implementing for apprenticeships. And they kind of hinted at that. So I think it'll just be if it was up to the folks we were talking to, they would have put it out already. So, but there are bigger forces at play. So we'll wait. Anything else before we move on to our housekeeping items?
Just an update from a healthcare perspective, and just for awareness, I'm working really closely with the team at IAA on some congressionally directed spending that they've obtained in partnership with us to develop healthcare apprenticeships in rural Vermont. The latest conversations that the two of us have had surround incorporating other employers into this. So hoping to provide additional updates on where that lands and where we can develop more healthcare apprenticeship using this funding. So really excited that we're able to leverage additional funding for this since it's a huge need in healthcare. So just an update there on the apprenticeship front.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Maybe a question for you. Yesterday I had a meeting with the Healthcare Workforce Development Director at AHS, Agency of Human Services. Have you had any interaction with this person, Suzanne Tremblay?
Yeah, actually met her for coffee a couple of weeks ago. She's really passionate about partnering and learning more about each of our organizations. So I'm really excited to be able to work with her.
Okay, so I did talk a little bit about apprenticeship with her and some other things that I knew were going on. So glad to hear that you were able to connect with her.
The other piece that I think will become a future topic and or presentation for the board is probably the creation of the reconstitution of the new state workforce development board and the executive director, future executive director, there isn't one right now, of the newly created Office of Workforce Strategy and Expansion Development, Strategy and Development. There are a couple different names tossed around, more than one in the last session, so it's a little tricky remembering where we landed, but that board hopefully will be fully appointed by the end of the year, if not at the start of the year, and we're still on the path for identifying an executive director. But the reason it's I think important for this board to have just a good working relationship, given that it's the same vein. But two, I think part of the legislature's desire is that the executive director of this new office be working on a comprehensive statewide workforce strategy, part of which would be each year also identifying legislative proposals for funding recommendations. So again, that would still go through the governor's office and so on and so forth, but just knowing where the two legislators are that we've been talking to are on this, they want something that's more cohesive or comprehensive. So that again, I think that those folks will play a role. When we think about future board meetings, I think we're looking quarterly. And depending on what we're thinking, maybe we want to look to February or March.
February 13th or 20th, or the Thursdays we could look at, if you want to keep it on kind of same day of the week at the same time. Or if that's our good, we can go out a little further.
Either of those are fine with me. Does anybody have any issues with the 13th or the 20th of February from 10 to noon? So let's do the
Is the 20th last week?
No, November's this, yes.
So can we do the 20th? Is that okay with everybody?
This time is still good for.
Terrific.
Cindy was working with business office.
Okay.
We have that.
So I'll pause here just for public comment. I don't think there's any general public here, but that being said, happy to open it up to any further discussion or take a motion to adjourn. Motion to adjourn and a second.
Second.
Thank you. All right. And all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Hey.
All right, it's unanimous. We are adjourned at 11:52 on the 14th. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate everybody's participation. I thought the conversation went really well. The only thing I'll say is, I think we're happy to continue to feed information to you.